So now we're going to talk about visualizing functions. So let's look at the following example. Let's say A is a set 1, 2, 3. B is going to be the set W, X, Y, and Z. And I'm going to look at the relation F1 from A to B, where F1 is 1Y, 2W, and 3Y. So how do we visualize these functions? So we do it in the following way. We use these essentially two ovals here. So here's one, and here's the other. And then in the left one, we're going to write the elements of A in there. So here's the element 1, element 2, and then 3. And then in the one on the right, you're going to write all the elements of B. So W, X, Y, and Z. And then you're going to draw an arrow connecting two things if they appear in your relation. So for example, let's start with 1Y. So I'll draw an arrow from 1 to Y. And then 2W, I'll draw an arrow from 2 to W. No, 2 to W. And then finally, the last one is 3Y. I'll draw an arrow from 3 to Y. Now what's really nice anytime you can visualize these things is it makes it easier for you to understand it. In particular, it's easier for me to see that this is a function because you should have coming out of your elements here, everything should have an arrow coming out, and there should be exactly one arrow coming out. And so if I look, 1 has an arrow coming out, 2 has an arrow coming out, 3 has an arrow coming out. So everything has an arrow coming out, and it has exactly 1. So it's easy to see that F1 is a function. And so this first set A would be your domain. Your second set B would be your codomain. Now let's look at something similar there to that one. We're going to use the same sets A and B from above. And now we're going to consider the relation F2 that's given by 1x, 2z, 3y, and 2x. And so let's draw the picture here for this one. Again, you're going to have A, which had the elements 1, 2, and 3. And then you have the set B, which has W, X, Y, and Z. And let's run down and fill in our arrows. So 1X, I'm going to draw an arrow from 1 to X. 2Z, draw an arrow from 2 to Z. 3Y is my next one. Draw an arrow from 3 to Y. And lastly, draw an arrow from 2 to x. From 2 to x. So if you see, everything in A does have an arrow coming out of it, but we've got a little bit of a problem here. If you notice, 2 has 2 arrows coming out of it. So I know f2 is not a function. So these diagrams here help us see what's going on with the relation in a much easier way. And on some hand, it helps us determine whether or not we have a function. So I do want to kind of at the end of this video mention like differences in, I'll say, thinking of functions. So in like college algebra and calculus, primarily when you think about functions, you think about them as being things like x squared. F of x equals x squared. But for us in foundations, when we talk about a function, we're thinking, so for example, here, if we use the same example that appears over here, we're thinking of them in terms of relations. So you're thinking about f as being a subset of R cross R, and you're really thinking of them as being ordered pairs. So in R cross R, where, for example, y equals x squared. So here, these both are really talking about the same function, but we're thinking about them kind of in different ways. In the college algebra calculus way, we're thinking about them being described by an equation here and inputs and outputs, but over in foundations of math, we're thinking about them as being ordered pairs, because functions are relations, so ordered pairs.